J-I-L-L-I-S.
Okay, now he was holding a Navajo Indian doll. The hair is made of the tail of the horse.
How do you spell Navajo, I suppose?
N-A-V-A-J-O.
A-H-O?
N-A-V-A Navajo.
J-O.
J-O, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
J-O.
Thank you.
That's Eddie Faye Gates. You know Eddie Faye. She does our publicity.
Yes.
Fingernails. And she is probably the oldest doll in the museum.
Oh, is she really?
She would be pre-1900. She looks like a voodoo lady.
And the other lady?
The other
Whoops.
lady.
You don't want to be on?
Your last name?
Millard. M-A-I-L-L-A-R-D.
And what kind of a creature were you holding?
Oh,
The
Alexander.
bride thing.
She was holding a Madame Alexander
M-A-D-A.
Bridal.
bridal doll. It's a. I was wondering she from. No. She's on there. Right here, Madame Alexander. Okay, now, okay. And then you want to get June and Richard Barber.
I thought I'd tell you that so if you took
Okay.
it, get your own reason.
Oh, all right. Oh, I won't.
The lady that I was calling,
Okay,
I just want to call and tell you, she will almost get it.
Okay.
Oh, you tell me they put it out.
do you,
Oh, wait, yeah, well, every time you have a
Were your airplanes here last time I was here?
They
I remember seeing it.
that's in the Eagle this week.
Built this 44 years ago.
That's why he built the things in '62. And see, that's his medal right there that he brought with it. Now this one he carried the basket of his airplane when he was in the Air Force. He had a jet always carried bombs all over when he was not flying. He worked on it all the time. No. And it'll still fly. Now look at this one over
She
here.
had interviews with the Maryland great.
See, here he is in Popular Science magazine in 1950. Did you do this?
How old was he when he built Eagles? Is he full grown?
He was in his.
Yeah, I used to, I had some when I was a kid, you flew it on the end of the string.
Control lines.
Yeah, control line, that's what it's called.
But I told her to do it.
Mine I didn't build myself and I never learned how to fly it, but I did use
Build
that.
those.
Yeah.
All the people who have ships are visited.
Well, we can build.
And I've just been getting them from all over the country and out of the country. I had people here that came from California, New York.
We catch up.
And I'd like to encourage more folks to
Yeah, I can write it down and ask Jerry if I can do it or not.
I tell you. I was rushed. She started getting over ships. She's trying to wait on a long distance call.
Let me get it right here off the table. Excuse me.
Well, I started to add it on. It's really nice.
Chicken! Emma Lawrence! Here,
Back.
Uh-huh.
I got some shoes. I got some shoes that match my dress. I'm gonna put them on.
Put those two red
Oh, those
dresses
colors.
together.
Yeah. If I stand there, you won't be able to see herself.
This is black and white.
Oh, that's black and white.
Okay.
Oh, that's what we should have been. Now, that's, I like that. That's very impressive.
See, it might even be, I'm so tall and big. It might be.
That looks good, the way, yeah.
That's looking pretty good. You scoot in a little closer.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And then this here.
Bella Phillips is a very interesting person who wears many hats. And as you can see, she has kindly let us borrow her collection of 25 years. And we have, well, at least we have a portion of her collection. And she has clowns of all kinds. You'll see mugs. You'll see expensive porcelain. You'll see paper mache clowns. Up here you'll see some of the Oriental type masks. And over here you'll see clowns that are made of cloth. That's one of them. Now over here we have some more of her cloth clowns. And this is a very, very old clown right here. These particular ones have a gold finish on them and they're on an onyx base. And of course it's a limited edition collection and very valuable. Isabel also collects pictures, paintings, and posters of clowns. And here in this case we have some of her smaller clowns, and you'll see pewter, you'll see wooden jumping jack type clowns, and limited edition plates. She has many, many more at home, and we are just very, very, very fortunate to have Isabel share her collection with us. She has been a teacher, a principal of Holy Family, and she stays busy all the time helping people and doing things. Now, if you look over here, now this is the most unusual collection that we have on loan. A gentleman by the name of Robert W. Means, native Tulsa, lived in California for some while, and he worked at the Disney Studios, and while he was there, he made electrical items for 29 different movies. And he also worked on some full-size rides, and when he came back to Tulsa, he constructed these rides. All of them have plenty of light and motion, and there's a Will Rogers sculpture back in the corner. And right in front of it is a replica of the Space Needle that's located in Seattle, Washington, back in that corner.
Mm-hmm.
And over on this side, there is a working model of an oil derrick, and you can see it pumping and turning around. And at the base of this Ferris wheel, you'll see some California raisins. There are some riders on the merry-go-round, and this is just a very interesting display. It attracts a lot of attention from everyone who comes in. Mr. Means is a very interesting, talented artisan. Arthur. And this is an example of his paper that came from Germany. If you notice the great details, the barns, the flags, these that seem to be flying through the air, well, this is a very special one. These are some more modern pop-ups, and then we have pop-ups. We have another example of Lothar Megan-Dorfer's pop-up. Incidentally, before we move on to this is a Madame Alexander trapeze artist doll, and this is the lion tamer from Madame Alexander. This is a Robin Woods doll.
And way I discovered from these depressed years that when break-ins would occur, they were different than some of the break-ins now. They just got merchandise, food substances, and something they could sell. My daddy never would press charges. And I didn't get an answer on that until I got older. On one occasion, and this is the last one that I'd like to bring in, Lady and her son came in and got merchandise, and I was checking them out, and after I finished the check, she said, "I don't have any money." But much of the merchandise had been taken on the outside. And I said, "May I call my father?" And I did, and he came up and he said, "Life is a little rough right through now, isn't it?" And she said, "It is." He said, "But I think it's going to get better." Said, "And let's just keep looking up." And he never mentioned the money. And after she was out and gone, I said, "Daddy, I don't understand." He said, "You don't know what she had under the apron either." He said, "But you will understand better by and by." And I learned from that during the Depression that you had to have faith in the people, in yourself, and in God. And somehow we stayed in business, and 5 children were educated from the business. Is that enough?
That's fine.
Okay.
We're standing on the spot where the Jarrett grocery store used to be. Now, where exactly was it?
Out here, up about the corner of that house.
All right. And now we have beautiful homes built in this area, mostly black middle-class families living here. And on up further, you'll see University Center. On June 1st, 1921, the second day of the Tulsa race riot, the Red Cross, the American Red Cross in St. Louis, sent Maurice Willows, a Canadian-born worker at the national headquarters. They Perryman's nursing days are over, but she has fond memories of them. Today she makes herself content at home with her crafts, and she loves to collect dolls. And what did you tell me about this one?
This one and this one, my cousin made, my little second cousin made. She likes to do this kind of work, and she made this when they was here in Tulsa. But this one comes from Germany.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
She
see
made that and sent that to me.
That one is from Bayern, Germany.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I love my doll. Promoting.
This is a painting done by Ima Johnson, who is now in her 70s. There are hundreds of more beautiful pictures like this that were drawn or painted by Mrs. Johnson. This is a beautiful painting that was done by Ima Johnson. And there are hundreds more just like this. And they were really not known about until a few years ago. Mrs. Johnson started painting in the late 1930s, and these pictures just lay dormant in her attic. Her niece, who has a gallery, discovered them a couple of years ago and was able to talk her aunt into letting her have an exhibit. They are now on display at the Church of the Restoration, 1314 North Greenwood. And we're going to interview this modest artist today, who is now in her 70s.
76.
She's 76, and she's now getting recognition for her drawings, which are painting, her artwork, which is just beautiful. One reason she just did this because she was an artist. She said she's just been painting and drawing ever since she can remember. And she's so modest, she didn't bring some of this out because she didn't want to call attention to herself. But now it's out of the closet, and Tulsa knows what a beautiful artist they have. And we're going to talk to Mrs. Ima Johnson today. When Mrs. Johnson was at the peak of her art interests and developing her talents, it was the height of segregation in Oklahoma. She lived right here in Tulsa, and the University of Tulsa was noted for its fine art department, which was headed by Dr. Ada Robinson, who is very well known in this community. She is the architect, designer, or decorator for Boston Avenue Methodist Church. She also decorated and did a beautiful, unusual ceiling for First Church of Christ Scientists at 924 South Boulder. She was head of the art department at TU, and Mrs. Johnson is going to tell how her path crossed this gentle little Quaker lady, and how they got around segregation rules, and how she was taught by Dr. Robinson. So Mrs. Johnson, tell us all about how you came to meet Dr. Robinson.
I was living in a
Let's wait.
apartment buildings on Haskell. It was about 1940. And Mrs. Frazier was my landlady, Effie Frazier. And she worked for Dr. Ada Robinson, and she told her, say, I have a room of a girl who really can draw, and Effie Frazier said this. And she said, well, Effie, Miss Robinson said this, why don't you bring her here and let me see her work? And so she, I got some of my drawings, and Mrs. Frazier carried me out to her work, and she was quite impressed. I hadn't done any painting, there's only drawings, and she is a watercolorist, and she showed me with a brush what kind of brush to get and what kind of paper, and she said all you need is just 3 colors, red, blue, and yellow, and of course the white of the paper would be the white. And so she, after I got the things she told me about, she showed me how to make a wash of the colors. And then she showed me how to make a little still life drawing. And then Mrs. Frazier would take it back to me, and they would go backwards and forth from work to home. And Mrs. Robinson would criticize my work for me and tell me what else to draw and paint. And she also had me to come I did this. Those were exam. I was a teacher of art there, except the first year that I taught music. And I did several things from 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. This is pottery done, clay modeling that was done by students. Let me see.
tell about who some of your famous students were.
Yeah. This is bookmaking. I don't recall whether it was 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, but I taught them to make these covers with potatoes called, and they are called potato prints. We took different kind of colors of paraffin and put it together, and the children did this. It's paraffin carving with a knife. Came from that batch that made the stack of books.
Okay, now.
Some of my students that loved art so very much became artists themselves. One is Alexander.
Mrs. Johnson is an inspiration to students, to the community, just everywhere, because she had such talent, and she was such a wonderful teacher in teaching this talent to her students. Some of her students have made names for themselves in the art world. Felix Cole, Alex Carberry, William Ashley, and Wilhelmina Brewer are nationally known artists today. Felix Cole has work here in Tulsa. In fact, he has a beautiful mural at Lacey Park, and he has a mural at the Greenwood Cultural Center. Alex Carberry has worked all over Oklahoma and the nation, and William Ashley and Wilhelmina Brewer as well. So this teacher inspired them and was their inspiration, and they give her credit for putting them on the path to becoming great artists. Henry Johnson, the husband of Mrs. Ima Wilson Johnson, has an interesting history himself. He attended Tuskegee Institute and was there when Dr. George Washington Carver was alive, and has lots of interesting stories to tell about Dr. Carver. And he also was a Tulsa businessman and had a store on Greenwood, so he is part of our Greenwood legacy. Mr. Johnson, just tell us about Tuskegee and then later about Greenwood.
Well, Tuskegee is a beautiful school, and even then it was a very nice school. That was way back there in '36. But I loved the school there, and I loved the faculty members. Dr. Carver was there, and he was one of my best friends in the school on the campus. And my roommate cut his hair. I'm sorry I can't remember the roommate's name right now, but he lived where my family lived, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. This roommate did. And he was a friend of Dr. Carver's and cut his hair. And he was paid a quarter every time he cut his hair. And we would talk to Dr. Carver, and Dr. Carver had a very fine voice, but he was a master of the language. His words were so interesting. And he could pick up even a blade of grass and talk about it half a day. He knew that much about the grass and everything. And I enjoyed talking about it. Would enjoy it. After they got used to that fine voice of his, they would enjoy it because he could talk so he told the story once of coming through Arkansas, going to speak at Fayetteville, the Arkansas University. And he was on the train, and they told him, some of the students were on there, and they told him, called him by his name, George, said, go get me a drink of water. And he got up and got it, and they gave him a quarter for getting the glass of water. And think of how surprised they were when they got to the campus, and there was the president of the college and all the celebrities there to meet Dr. Carver, who was really their speaker. And they were shocked and horrified. But he never mentioned it. He was always this kind of a person. He didn't mind being called. He sat on Langston campus a half a day on a bench. And Peter had this little hat he used to wear. And they passed by him half a day and didn't anybody recognize him on the Langston campus. And well, he was a wonderful man. I had an uncle just like him. And I'll always believe that they were related because they had the same interest in plants, the same interest. And my uncle was just like him. He could go out and pick up plants and name the different parts of the plants. And he was the only one who knew, besides Dr. Carver, that could cure polio in those days. And he used a plant for that. And we go down to the Arkansas River and pick them up. And, well, that's all I've got to say about the grass there, but then I wasn't a part of that. I wasn't there when he saw the grass.
Okay, now back to Tuskegee.
And there was another, well, he was young then, his father was a druggist, drugstore, one of the biggest drugstores in town, named Thomas. It was Thomas. And he and I were going to sell we were going into card business. And we bought all these cards and we were going to get them and, you know, set up a card shop. And he died and left me with all these cards. And just happened I had these two stores and I put them in there to sell them. So we sold them. But that was heartbreaking because I hate to see him. He was a good friend. And I hate to see him die. But Greenwood, those days, had the reputation of being the Wall Street of Tulsa because we had everything down on Greenwood that the white man had on uptown. We had everything there, clothing stores, drug stores, theaters, and anything he had uptown, we had it on Greenwood. I've always believed that that's why they put that street through there, so that it would tear up our town. But we stretched in all the way from Archer, where Latimer's Barbecue was farmed, not on Archer, but on Apache. It went out Greenwood right into his barbecue place, Latimer's Barbecue. And we had business along that whole stretch. from pool halls. I remember when they moved us off out there, they thought they was killing us. But Marshall, they said Marshall would be our deadline, and they wanted to come to Marshall. Now they said that uptown. They said that in a meeting, that they wanted us on the other side of Marshall. They wanted from Marshall to be the inner city. But they never got that far. They never did complete it. They were going to widen the street down here, Virgin. That was one of the only through streets we have, you see, Virgin and Pine. And they were going to widen Virgin and enlarge it, and that would have really pleased me because I have a building on that street, and they were going to widen it. But they never got around to doing that. They haven't so far. But it's still on the books up there. They got it up.
So you missed the days of Greenwood in its heyday.
Oh, I do. Greenwood was beautiful. Greenwood was great. We had everything down there. We had all kinds of drugstores and pool halls, and I was a pool shark. And we had everything down there that they had uptown. And I really missed that.
Thank you. That's
Some spring line, after the song, but I have a lot of regret that she has in a shop that has been framed. She had 3 or 4 children, man. I said, I wouldn't give it to her.
And this is the one you did with the slide.
She knows that I had it, but I said, no, you can't have that, that's mine.
And tell me about
Esther. Put these blocks on. They said it would work, the printing would be more brilliant with that kind of material. And cotton wouldn't have worked so well. And these are different drawings at this other school. I told you that I went to Tulsa University, Kendall.
Yes.
Kendall. So it's different grades between the pictures. I just put, selected some from every grade. And I made it from a magazine that had a picture, and it told you how to do it. And they had all these bright colors set together. That was made in 1975. It's supposed to be up in the front room where you don't see a picture. That's one of his little great grandnieces and something. Kind of abstract. I didn't see any picture. I just kind of made it. Working artist. It was on the cover.
Oh.
And this is a picture, same thing. And I looked out the window and I saw these students walking around. Look at the old-fashioned car.
Oh, that's cute.
And I said, no, I don't want to sell this. Neither do I want to sell this. This is Mingo Creek.
Oh,
And I had it as a drawing. It might have been a lithograph, but it was in black and white. And I painted it from this black and white picture that I had. There's that other one now with all the spirals and clouds and stuff. I think I went to the kitchen and learned how to paint the horse. I don't have a date on it, do I? Well, I shouldn't ever leave off the date, but I did. A big basket, just like the others on. I added some more things to it to kind of make it into a design. Now I'm gonna let you tell me, who is that?
that's you. How old? That's 64. That's the little cloth from DeEtta Robinson.
You remember Don White piece that I found around the house. And of course I still have that teapot. But she said, I did some more with apples too. And she said, you can do apples better than my own students.
That was Dr. Robinson when she was...
when I went there that time, when I modeled on.
Oh, yes.
And,
She was head of the art department at GU then.
64. 1964. I had a little hair then. And we did his son. His boy came out and with a little straw hat on and just naked from here up. And I've forgotten his name now. And I have, Francine has this down to her building. Yeah, instead of Francine, Canetti's a sister.
You're Francine?
Yeah.
Beauty just confuses people, doesn't it?
You'd move down to Langston if you, for the homecoming.
You'll be responsible?
Yeah, I'll be
You
responsible.
don't want the quilt for you. Tablecloth. You know, when we eat at the breakfast table, you say, when is my picture coming back? I say, we've got to tell Francine that we have to have it. You know, before they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, they had some swords with them. And of course, this, you know who that is, don't you? Judas. Judas' hand. We're about to take him away. And in the Bible it says drops of sweat drop down like drops of blood. See those oh, I took a long time before I made this up. Just put it back and take it in and put it back. And this one had embroidery on it, so I did embroidery on mine. All along there is embroidery. See, it had a lot of reds in it, and whatever color was on that book. I tried to get one to look like it. That's the one they wanted me to sell.
That was not for sale.
This is not for sale. Neither one of these three are for sale. And the one I'm making, if I ever finish it, it won't be for sale either.
What is it?
It's kaleidoscope. You know, I showed you.
Oh, yes.
At the house.
Yes, yes.
It's all pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm quilting it.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't finished quilting it. But he's wanting that to go home and make that home too.
Today, 94-year-old Jobie Elizabeth Holderness spends her time at her beautiful home in North Tulsa, usually making ceramics such as these beautiful pieces we're looking at now. And that pig she made, this with the little ducks, this. But she didn't always stay at home and make things. For 42 years, she taught elementary school at Dunbar Elementary.
In library science.
In library science. And in addition to that, she and her late husband, Lynn Holderness, ran a grocery store on North Greenwood called Banner Market. And in interviewing these black settlers, these Tulsa pioneers, that market keeps coming up in the names and memories of many, many people. It was a landmark in Tulsa. And we're going to talk to Mrs. Holderness today and hear about that period in history when Greenwood supplied all the needs of the black Tulsans and how Banner Market helped to supply some of those needs. Thank you, Mrs. Holderness, for joining us today. Would you tell us about that time in history?
I came to Tulsa in 1925 and began work at Dunbar Elementary School as librarian and history and literature teacher. Back, I taught a little of everything. And then I organized the first girls troop among the black children in Tulsa, which was troop number 52. Now they have, I'm sure, more than 1,000 troops in Tulsa. But we sold cookies, and seemingly, best I remember, the cookies were 25 cents a box at that time. And of course now I think they're about $2.50 a box. But the girls who sold the largest number of cookies, one was crowned as the Cookie Queen, and Antoinette Mans and the Monday Girl, and just so many of the kids each year will win the prize, as we call it, as the Cookie Queen. And for years, the Camp Scott that the white Girl Scouts use, they did not allow us to use that camp. We had to go all the way to Ardmore, Oklahoma to use the state park for camping, until I wrote letters and protested to the headquarters in New York. And they made them open the camp up to black Girl Scouts. And we never left the Girl Scouts alone. Some adults stayed with them at all times, and there are many adults now who grew up and were Girl Scouts. And we never had any problems because we stayed with them. We slept with them, ate with them, as supervised their swimming and everything. And it was such a sad something to see what finally happened. And all these people working with Girl Scouts at that time were volunteers. And then when they had paid Girl Scouts, going out white paid Girl Scouts with the troops and all, and when they had Girl Scouts in one tent and the adults in another tent, that was not heard of. And when we went camping, we stayed, slept with the girls, ate with them, and did everything. And to see the 3 Girl Scouts murdered was such a shock to everyone, because it seemed it had to be negligence on those adults to allow the girls be in one tent and the adults all in another tent. That was not heard of. And many
1930s, Tulsa was booming. Rich oil people came from all over the United States because of the oil finds in Red Fork and all of the other places near Tulsa, Jinx and so forth. Hotel business was booming. We had the Adams Hotel, the Alvin Hotel, the Mayo, and these were scenes of all kind of events involving the rich oilmen and other businessmen in Tulsa. Mr. Alfred Barnett was a waiter at that time, a waiter and a busboy in many of these hotels, and his path crossed some of these rich millionaires. Today, Mr. Barnett is a minister to the aged, a different kind of group, not the rich and powerful, but little old black people in nursing homes. He visits these nursing homes, usually by public transportation, has a routine where he gives them a prayer, some scriptural readings, and a little short sermon. And today we want to hear from this man who has ministered to the wealthy and is now ministering to people in Tulsa's, North Tulsa nursing homes. Mr. Barnett, would you tell us what it was like waiting on and seeing these rich oil men at that time?
It was a pleasure, and as a busboy at the Chamber of Commerce, that is where I first had a chance to meet the different oil people and oil men, because they would come to the chamber. I didn't know any of them personally, but whenever they were around, you could always hear a whisper in the air. Somebody would know them and they would tell you who they were. As a busboy, I worked for the chamber, did my job, and everybody was really interested in me, and they helped me as I worked. The waiters that waited at the Chamber of Commerce was supposed to have. The whisper. We were peeping. We couldn't go in. We just peeped at the door. And I could hear the waitresses talking and whispering of what was going on. And I heard one of the waitresses said that they had felt short of their gold, and Mr. Mabry made up the difference. And when Mr. Mabry made up the difference of what they were supposed to have, he sung a song, "Don't Fence Me In." And that was one of my real experience at the chamber. From then on, I began to move on at different places, working at the Tulsa Club as a waiter.
Fort Knox, Texas, Camp Atterbury.
Kentucky.
Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Knox, Kentucky, Camp Atterbury, Indiana, Kearns Fields in Salt Lake City, Utah, and spent 2 years in Japan. He said he was in the Tokyo
Systems, Tulsa, and that he loved. Working with the boys in junior high, I must tell this. They didn't have any money in the 6th grade it was, and so they wanted some T-shirts made with their numbers for basketball on there. And the young wife, being me, I decided I would try to put the numbers and the names on the sweatshirts. And you can ask Julius Piggies and some of those men who were on that team. Those were the most crooked letters you've ever seen. But I got them on there, and they played on the team for Dunbar Elementary School with those T-shirts on. And whatever it took to make the ball roll for the schools, Quick did it. He loved those. He loved the schools in Tulsa, because that was what he knew and what he had worked for all those years.
What about other community work? Didn't you get some awards for community work?
Oh yes. Well, I say volunteer work. I took so much of our time together, and I took up my cue from him mostly. But he was awarded, we were awarded together this Tulsa Hall of Fame in 1990. We both received these, and the affair was held at Southern Hills and so forth, and it was very a wonderful tribute. He had begun ailing at that time and could not be present, but our son came and accepted it.
I was very proud of Thelma and Henry Whitlow. They are indeed the epitome of the unselfish, dedicated community servant. And through their efforts, this community is richer today. And we can never be grateful enough to them for all that they have done for this Tulsa community. There are many images about Tulsa, Oklahoma. Just ask people and some will say cowboys, Indians, oil wells, But one thing that is consistent with most people is they do remember Tulsa's rich musical heritage. In fact, in 1994, a national rating of outstanding events in North America listed only one Oklahoma event, and that was the Greenwood Jazz Festival, the annual Greenwood Jazz Festival. So Tulsa does have a reputation for its music. In the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the big band sounds were very popular with people all over the United States. Many of these big band leaders came to Tulsa: Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Jimmy Lunsford. And Tulsa had its very own homegrown musicians, such as Alfred Denny, Clarence Love, and Ernie Fields. Today we're going to talk to Mr. Ernie Fields, who's long since retired from the music industry, but who vividly remembers those days. Mr. Fields, tell us about Tulsa and music and the days when you had your big band.
That went good. But I wasn't in that just by alone. We started on it or something, and that one I didn't think, and the others didn't think anything either, and it just came on and just did it all.
So you didn't expect that to go to the top like it did?
No.
Oh.
Didn't take that to go at all.
Where did you get your inspiration for your music? Who influenced you, your songs and your kind of music?
How's that?
Who influenced you? What other musicians influenced you? Did you like Ellington or Basie? Did you like them?
It was. I would think it was more Ellington.
You liked
Ellington? Yeah. That influenced me. Of course, I was very enthused over Basie and was closer to Basie than I was Duke. Oh. Yeah. Just somehow it happened. It was. But anyway, I was looked like I was influenced more on what you call it? Yeah, there.
Okay.
I'm trying to think something else I want to say about when we were talking about the.
Tell me about this Oklahoma Hall of Fame award. You were inducted into the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame. How did that feel? Were you very proud? Your own city recognized you.
Yes, well.
How did you feel about that award?
Well, How did I feel? My goodness, I just said it can't be true, but I'm glad it is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
What do you think about modern music, the rap and all this stuff? Do you miss the good old days, the big bands? Was it better then?
Yes, because it looked like the other, when that come over, I just couldn't get from it. And talking to the others that is greater than me, we used to talk about it. So it's all account basic, without big print account. And we get to say, hey, what is it they're going for now? And we couldn't see, it looked like it wasn't. But anyway, something just caught on, went on there.
But you liked yours better.
Oh, yeah.
I did too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ernie Fields, for sharing this with us today.
Yeah.
You're a wonderful musician.
Yeah.
Tulsa's very proud of you.
Thank you.
Pocahontas Greadington spent her entire professional career in public education. 15 years in Gary, Indiana, 5 years in Muskogee, and the last 20 years in Tulsa Public Schools, making a total of 40 years in public education. She was a math major and a math teacher. She spent her life trying to dispel this myth that our black children can't learn math and science, or that they're not good with their spatial related learnings. And she served for a number of years, the last years of her career really, as supervisor of math for the entire Tulsa public school systems, kindergarten through 12.
The elementary school.
Elementary school.
Kindergarten
through 6. And she also served on some national writing committees, math writing committees. And she will just tell us what it was like being a trailblazer in math, a field that many minorities, many blacks had been frightened away from. And here she was excelling in that field and trying to tell our boys and girls that they could too. So Pocahontas, please tell us about your days as a math teacher and a math supervisor.
Well, it didn't really start out that way. I finished Langston with a Bachelor of Arts in Education, but I always loved math, and I took more math courses than anything. But it ended up, I was teaching in elementary schools, and in some cases it was the homeroom, which is a polite word for everything. You teach everything, social studies, everything except the special subjects like music and physics, that kind of thing. But anyway, when I got my master's degree, I decided to get it in math education, so I'd really have a better knowledge of how to go about teaching math. And it turned out to be a very good option, because I got my master's at at Oklahoma State University, and I was fortunate enough to have two professors who took a very great interest in what I was doing. And when they found out that I was from Tulsa, after I finished and came over and was working with the Tulsa Public Schools, they came over and tested my children and just did a lot of things in research. And when I became the supervisor, they sent their, I guess you'd call them practice teachers over to work with me, and that was a big plus also. We went out to the various schools, and it seems that elementary children really love young men teachers. They have something. When I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop, I realized how children are drawn to the male teacher. So I really use those young men to sort of bring out in the children the fun that math can be,
along with how wonderful it is to be able to do math. And they were wonderful. I learned a lot from them. I learned as much from them as the children did, I think. But that's how. And that was during the period when the so-called new math was introduced, where children learned the philosophy, the reasoning behind numbers rather than just learning by rote. It was a great experience. And the way I got to working with publishers, one time Dr. Duncan, who headed the math team, came down and visited the Tulsa Public Schools. He was writing a book. And since we were buying a lot of our math materials from the Houghton Mifflin Company, he chose Tulsa. Anyway, he came, and when he visited my office and I took him around to some of the schools, he asked me to be on the team for writing math. And this is that team that I was on. I'm on here somewhere. Where am I? Wait a minute. Here. Had to find myself. And so each one of these people was assigned some grade or some subject in math. Calculus, geometry, algebra, or in the 8th grade or 7th grade, I was assigned to do all the materials for the 3rd grade. And let's see, this is the 3rd grade book. Then this was, can you close that box out? See, this is part of the materials that I did for that. Then in '69, I was asked to write a handbook for the elementary math teachers, and this is that handbook. It had a lot of help for the teachers. And when Dr. Duncan saw this, then he had me critique his book that he was writing for elementary teachers. And he sent copies enough. What he did was he sent enough copies for 30 elementary teachers to have his book and have workshop instructions every Thursday. Then the other control group were given the book, that there were 30 of them, but without the workshop. Then the children were tested at the end, and those who had the book and the workshop, their youngsters did much better than those who only had the book. But those who only had the book, their scores increased, but not nearly as much as the others. And I thought that was interesting. He was doing this research himself.
We've been having an interesting conversation with Pocahontas Greadington about math and math education, and she has said some interesting things off camera, and we're going to get her conclusions now about some of the criticism we hear about American students, that they do not do as well on math and science testing as European children or Japanese children, and specifically about African American children, how they are tuned off of math and science and steer away from that. So Mrs. Greadington, give us some final comments on those two issues.
Well, as I told you, I don't think when they make these statements, just recently I read where America didn't finish first, didn't finish second, didn't finish third, but finished 14th among scores as compared to European and Japanese students. I don't think it's quite fair to compare like that, because in those countries, right students, and I do too. But anyhow, that encourages children to take more interest in learning. Then teachers have to pick up those shy ones, or those who feel that they cannot learn, and help them see that they can, and teach them what they can learn. And it's surprising how much they can learn. I've seen children get on the street and sing 17 verses of some song without missing a word. Why can't they put that into learning useful things? But we don't, I won't say we don't, but many parents are busy. It's harder to make a living now. And there are a lot of factors that enter in. When I was coming along, we did not have the distractions that children have now. And we must find a way to work around that and save our children.
Thank you so much for those interesting, wise words about educating our young people. And I admire you math people, you people with math and science backgrounds, because you prove that with hard work you can get it. So thank you, Pocahontas Greadington.
You are so welcome.
This wall is what Mrs. Greadington's husband used to call the bragging wall, and it's a testimony of the esteem, the great esteem that these two were held by the Tulsa community. On the left side are all the awards of Mr. Greadington, and on the right are the awards of Pocahontas. Proudest of this award more than all the other awards she has ever won, and she will tell us why.
It meant so much because so many different different faiths were concerned with this, and there were 3 of us who received this award at the time that I did. And it was Rabbi Sherman of Temple Israel, Dr. Wiseman, Dr. William Wiseman, and
can't remember the other one, but the two men were outstanding ministers, and I felt very humble but very proud to receive it. The different organizations included the National Conference of Christian and Jews, of which I've been a member for many years, and now I'm an honorary member of the board, one of three, and the only woman. And to me, that means something, that people recognize what you're trying to do and help you, reward you, I should say. I'll be like Jack Benny. Once he said, when he was receiving an Oscar, an Emmy, some award on television, he said, I don't deserve this, but I have arthritis, and I don't deserve that either. So I may not deserve it, but I am so proud to have it.
Of course, anyone who studies Tulsa history, who knows any little thing about Tulsa, knows that it was founded by Creek Indians, and that the term Tulsa comes from a Creek word meaning town. So Tulsa town, founded by Creek Indians, 18th and Cheyenne, and Tulsa is the council oak tree where the Creeks brought their sacred fire from their home in Georgia. And the names connected with the founding of Tulsa, the name most heard is the Perrymans. The Perrymans, George, Lewis, and others. And we, of course, know that the original Perrymans and Graysons and other Creek tribes intermarried frequently. And so if you hear the name of Perryman, Grayson, Hodge, and a bunch of others, that they tend to be connected, intermarried. What isn't so widely known is that a lot of these Perrymen were black people, and they were left out of the history books. Many of these Scottish traders like Perryman, like Grayson, many of those Scottish traders came into this region as early as the 1700s, 1800s. They intermarried with Indian women, but what isn't told in the history books is that they also married black women and had families. And those were conveniently left out of the history book. Now one historian, one noted Oklahoma historian, Angie Debo, did try to portray that. She did put that in her books, but it was not acceptable at that time. It was conveniently edited out. Sometimes references were made, but most times publishers just said, out of respect for the white families, we will not include that. Now the time is opening up for a true history, for telling the entire history of all people, and that's what we're trying to do today, get a little history about the Perrymans, the founders, the Creek Indian founders of Tulsa, and about their black relatives. And we're talking today to Thelma DeEtta Perryman Gray. She is a descendant of the Perrymans who founded the city. Her father was John Frederick Perryman, and her mother was Luella Bertha Grayson Perryman, who was born in Oak Mulgee, about 47 miles from here, my hometown. And so today we just want to hear from Mrs. Gray, not so much the genealogical history, because we can get that from historians, but we want to hear firsthand accounts about her growing up here in Tulsa, the Tulsa County, right near the city founded by her ancestors. And we want to hear what life was like for her then, and perhaps what legacy, what she'd like to tell us about her Creek Indian heritage. Thank you, Mrs. Gray, for talking to us today. And would you just kind of tell us where you were born and what it was like then, and about your father's and his Indian ways and so forth?
I was born on near 21st Street, about where the Skelly Drive crosses, about what would be 4 blocks south of there. We called it at that time 21st and Mingo Creek. And I don't think that road was established where it is today, where the highway is today, only a wagon road. But we had another one built that came around the creek, closer to the creek, that came up to our house. And I was born there and lived with my family, and I guess at that time, well, when I was born, it would be 7 ahead of me, because I'm the 7th child. And we lived right near the creek, and it was a deep, real deep creek. And it was so deep, my 2 older brothers were expert swimmers, but they could never find the bottom of that creek. It was beautiful and wide, and most of it was wooded, very heavily wooded. And we had places on that creek where the water ran and trickled down, and there was clay that we would eat and play with for our food. We'd eat that clay for making our dinners as children. And it was so beautiful there. And my father used to, I remember when he has thrown dynamite in the water, and to kill a fish, to give his big fish fries that he had very often. And they would have half of the area that knew them there, and my mother then would cook a lot of other food. And my grandmother lived just not far from us, Mary Grayson. And she would bring over food, and they would have hundreds of people that came to eat fish and have a good time. And at that time, they strung lights elf trees with a bottle and some kerosene. Sometimes when they didn't have kerosene, they used wood, wax, to put on the wick that came out of the bottle to have lights. And then they would have square dances, and they would have a lot of fun. There was also this area where the Alsamo First Baptist Church started. They started under the oak tree that was there. And we have the history of that with our church program today. The church that started under the old oak tree. And we have it here in Tulsa at Peoria and Zion, Avenue 2443 North Peoria. The church has the same name, and a lot of the descendants from the people from Alsamo are with us today. And it was just a beautiful, happy time in my youth with so many children. My mother and father had 12, and my mother had one before, but it was 13 of us. And we all lived there. And my father, when I was a little girl, and I could just barely remember this, he used to take us in a wagon, and he would go to an Indian camp. And I remember they had a lot of pots cooking all around, and my father was trying to teach them something about wagons, something about steel that they didn't know. I don't know whether it was the wheels or what, but he was showing them how to use that, because they had begun to use wagons and teams and not have to depend on their horses. They had better road, wagon roads, or pathways, or whatever they call them, to take them from one place to another, and they began to use horses, wagons, and harnesses. And my father would show them how to fix those kinds of things. I remember that when I was a very little girl, and I know we would fish there and play with the kids in the water. Of course, we kept everything in the water, the horses. But in my home, on Mingo, we'd keep the cows and the babies. I remember one of the best little whippings we got was having them babies out in the water with the pigs and everything. We had everything in there but the chicken. And my grandmother caught us saying, boy, we had a time. And anyhow, we just, they used to call us the little naked kids because that's the way we went swimming. We were in the woods and nobody hardly ever came there. At least if they came, we would know they were there and we put on some clothes, but most of the time we went around naked. But anyhow, it was a beautiful time we had there. I'm not...
Today it is acceptable to recognize all of America's populations, race, religion, geographic regions. So the last barrier seems to be breaking down, and that is claiming African American ancestors. For a long period, those who were light enough to pass passed as white, and it was, while people prided themselves on their ethnic ancestry and their Native American ancestry, nobody prided themselves on African American ancestry. But today things are changing. In fact, Mrs. Gray has met some of her white and Creek Indian relatives right here in Tulsa and has been invited out to see some of them. She's going to share with us a little bit about meeting some of her white and Indian relatives. Now, Mrs. Perryman, Mrs. Gray, tell us about that.
Well, I was working there on the 31st, and it's on the same street as across the street. I don't know whether that was Utica or not. I can't remember the street. But I was working there, and I met the maid that worked for the Perryman. Mm-hmm. And then she told her, the lady she worked for, who I was, and she said, that's my cousins. I want you to have her come by. And we made a date. And that morning, I was just too scared to go there. I got there to the walk, and I didn't really work far from there at that time, but I walked on to work, and I wouldn't stop. So the next time I saw her, the maid was quite a few months later. She said that lady got up and got dressed and fixed your breakfast for you and waited for you, and you didn't show up. And I was so hurt because you didn't come. And I told her I was just too afraid. I didn't know the maid that good, and I didn't know whether I should go or not. So I changed my mind, and I wouldn't go because that was the area where I worked in, and I knew them, and I knew how they were. But well, in Tulsa, you know, we had, my father had his land down at Haskell, and mother had hers here, but the way they got the land from us, basically, my father liked to drink. He liked to bottle them, so he would go down and those white men would take him into the Mayo Hotel, and his brothers that he was with a lot were darker skinned and they couldn't go in. And up there is where they did all their devilment about having my father sign his land away, my two older brothers' lands away, and my oldest brother, that was the brother that my mother had when they got married, was a Webb, and Felix got nothing from his land. Vincent worked like a dog with crushers up at Garnett and everywhere he could, every way he could. And as fast as he would get a lawyer to defend him, the faster they would buy the lawyer out. Finally, he found a young Jewish lawyer that would stick by him, and he believed that he would tell the truth about it. My father had left home and was over at Oklahoma City. And my brother walked over there, and nobody would tell him where he was. So finally, he left a message with some of his friends, and my father wrote at a court trial. And my father was supposed to testify to help him get his land back. And they found my father dead at 4 o'clock in the morning by a hit and run driver. So he didn't get to testify to that. Oh, yes, I forgot that. Yes, when I was a little girl, and my mother and I would go, not just me, it was 2 or 3 of us, would go by there, and they'd come running out and say, hello, Aunt Lou. And mother would go in and outside. And anyhow, probably, because we were barefoot, and mother was having us down at the back, shoes and things for us. And I never. Was a
This store is a landmark in Tulsa for visitors. It has beautiful arts, paintings, ceramic, just all kinds of things pertaining to the Indian world. And whenever I travel and visit, I tend to take gifts and co-workers from the Lions Indian Store. I never knew that those people were akin to mornings a week. She is at senior citizen centers in Tulsa. This is Friday, so she's at Carver Senior Citizen.